Okay, welcome back to Live Impact News here on this Monday morning, and we are going to be joined by a special guest here now. Early on in the week, we get to do an interview right off the bat about a very unique topic here. This is Julia Feerrar from Virginia Tech University, the head of digital literacy initiatives and associate professor at University Libraries at Virginia Tech. Julia, I'm Connor. This is our first time meeting. It's always kind of fun when our first time meeting is live during an interview, but thank you for joining us. I hope you're having a good Monday so far.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Definitely. And, we appreciate you being here because all of the different ways in which artificial intelligence can be covered, it's almost too expansive to even wrap your arms around. And this gives us an opportunity to kind of focus in on something very specific that I do think speaks to the uncertain future that comes with AI in general. And so we know a little bit of background here before we dive into this. Taylor Swift filed 3 trademarks on Friday, two of which cover her voice, two separate phrases, "Hey, it's Taylor Swift" and "Hey, it's Taylor." That third trademark covers a picture of Swift that, if you are familiar with some of her touring, will be very sort of familiar to you. She's holding a pink guitar. She's on stage. And so three different trademarks. She's filed over 300 trademarks in general during her career, but these three specifically seem to point to protection from artificial intelligence. I'll just start very broad, Julia. When you see that these trademarks are filed by one of the biggest artists in the world, what's your sort of first impression of this move by Swift?
Sure. I think this is a really interesting moment. And this move by her makes me think about so many aspects of digital literacy that she's enacting herself, thinking about, what are her rights of her image in digital spaces? How does AI feature into that? How there have been lots of examples of her image used in the past for misinformation or as part of political campaigns, even. So she's at an interesting point to be making this move. And I'm really curious about how that will impact the conversation going forward for all of us as we think about how we want things to look with AI and the kinds of policy and protections we'll set up for that.
And can you give us an idea of what exactly she's protecting here? I mean, we obviously we said, tangibly, it's those two phrases and that one image. But what sort of protection is she providing herself in this situation?
Right. So I am not a legal expert, so I'll give that caveat. But in
Mm-hmm.
filing a trademark, she's protecting her brand essentially and her ability to make money off of her image and to enact that. It does not change that someone would still be able to create a deep fake of her with an AI tool. So technologically, that's not changing. This is her setting herself up for legal action when and if that happens again.
And you mentioned how, she has had issues with AI in the past. Very specifically, just for a little bit more context for our viewers, during the 2024 election, at the time, presidential candidate, now President Donald Trump, shared an AI generated image of Swift in kind of sort of pointing to an endorsement for himself. And that was many people probably remember that, a major controversy at the time, which kind of speaks to even beyond maybe music being created by AI, celebrities' images and likenesses can be used sort of without their own consent in this type of situation. I'm wondering, when it comes to the entertainment industry and this artificial intelligence situation and digital literacy, you'd look at those three things combined. Are you able to pinpoint kind of what the biggest fear is for artists in this world, in this realm that we're talking about?
That's a great question. And I think there are a lot of layers to this, a lot that we can be thinking about. There's the aspect of just people having control of their image and having the right over being able to say, yes, this is something I said, this is something I didn't say, versus that fear of someone's going to be able to make it look like I said something that I didn't, which is a fear I think that we all can have and is a very real thing that's not just about entertainment and just about celebrities. That's a very human thing. So I think that's first most core thing. But then there is also the workforce element of this, that in entertainment specifically, we have people making their livelihood off of their image, their voice, thinking about voice actors, actors, folks for whom this has very real economic implications as well.
I want to ask, it's so interesting to think about just the concept of someone's own voice and then the sort of transfer towards who owns that voice. It's something that I never even would have considered. It seems so obvious. The person whose voice it is owns that voice. Obviously, that's sort of like a reductive way to look at it. But when it comes to your voice and what you own in terms of that voice. I mean, where does that world stand now? I'm surprised that trademarks even need to be filed. I would have thought that this would be something that was sort of understood and already woven into sort of the entertainment legal industrial complex, if you will.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And the nuances of that in terms of legal implications are not something that I can speak to at great length.
Mm-hmm.
But I do, in terms of digital literacy, have a general understanding that we are in lots of different places with this. Digital identity is a piece of digital literacy where we think about what kinds of images do I put out there about myself online? What do I share? What kinds of choices do I make? But then also, what's outside of my control? What information is collected about me in terms of my personal data, my browser history, my activity on social media? And so those are kind of groupings of things that we might also think like, oh yeah, you should have complete control over that, right? Because those are things tied to you and what you're doing. But then the companies and the platforms that we're using do have control over that data and are able to collect that data about us. And a connected idea here is about a term called personality rights or rights of publicity. So the rights of an individual to control the use of their identity, then their name, their image, their likeness. And my understanding generally is that we have different state laws and different ways that's interpreted in the US right now. We have different things going around the world with that. And I think we're at a point where a lot of that is really murky right now as we're seeing changes in technology that kind of push against our understanding of that.
And in some ways, technology is moving faster than the judicial system can, right? And so there is definitely a Wild West type quality to this. I thought you mentioned something interesting, whereas different states have different laws in terms of how this breaks down. And maybe part of the reason that the trademark yourself trend has become slightly more popular with entertainment figures is because those trademarks can be filed in federal court. I know that gets back into the legalese of the whole thing, but that is something I saw as well to sort of add a little more context to your answer there. I'm wondering if you are a Taylor Swift fan and you are seeing this all happen and you're sitting at home and you're like, well, I want to make sure that the Taylor Swift songs that I hear and images that I see and messages that I see are actually from the artist that I love and not a computer somewhere or a bad actor with AI mechanisms. How can fans sort of help themselves be more literate about these new problems?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. The implications of this for truth and trust are huge. And especially when we have a celebrity that we follow, we want to know that the information we're following is the right and true information from them. Absolutely. Things that I would encourage people to think about are first pausing whenever they see something new or that sparks a really big reaction. Maybe you see an announcement from that purports to be from Taylor that she's got a new album dropping tomorrow. We pause and think, okay, does that make sense? What am I feeling about that? Why am I feeling? I'm recognizing those big emotions, so now I'm going to take a step back. Then we can think about what are the trusted sources that I can go to. Taylor Swift, in particular, is very active on Instagram and on social media. So if I go directly to her accounts, that's hopefully going to be a more authoritative source than wherever I might have seen this. So if I'm seeing it in a way that seems like it's directly from her, then I can also try to verify with other sources, opening up your browser of choice and seeing, is anybody reporting on this already? Where are their sources from? How can I kind of track this and trail this around from multiple things? The main idea that I want to give people is not just staying within a single thing that you're seeing. You may see a piece of media that's sparking that big reaction. It can be tempting to try to verify and zoom in and look really closely at that thing, but it's often going to be a faster and more productive thing to then go outside and find another source.
And it's funny because as you go through these strategies for this particular situation, they very closely mirror the advice that we often give to viewers about more modern digital scams when it comes to text messages that are trying to get you to click on a certain link or emails that come through. Very similar to what you described, where it's going to seem big and exciting at first and almost a too good to be true type of quality maybe to look out for. And so go and check other sources. And so that, it's interesting how those two things are sort of in a dance with each other, separate issues, but similar things to look out for. So that kind of struck me as interesting there. When it comes to sort of this AI within the entertainment industry, right? Because we know that AI is going to have so many impacts on our society, but just for the entertainment industry, is there anything you are looking out for in terms of what the next wave of this is? And this can be something that's positive to come, or again, something that people need to be aware of and look out for to come. Is there anything you see in the near future to look out for in terms of artificial intelligence impacting the entertainment industry?
Mm. That's a really interesting question. I think to me, the opportunity is to dig into the human questions that we might be able to see most clearly in entertainment, because that is something that we are, so many of us, invested in as a place to find enjoyment and fun. And when technology changes and legislation changes, then add some doom and gloom to that fun. I think that's a place that we feel that as humans, but that's an opportunity to think more broadly about some of these digital literacy questions that come up in so many places, where we're thinking about, what are the ethics of being a person online? What are my rights and responsibilities as an individual? How am I going to verify my information? So I think entertainment is a place that we can see that really clearly and feel that coming back to those emotions. But I think the opportunity is to come back to this bigger sense of, really, what do we want from our digital lives and how do we want to enact that?
My last question for you, and again, this kind of dives a little bit into the legal side of things, but when it comes to somebody who's looking at this and they're saying that, well, one of my favorite things to do is to create funny, wholesome, perfectly innocent sort of AI generated images of Taylor Swift and send them to my Taylor Swift group chat. And we all get a laugh out of it, and so on and so forth. Those little sort of more personal uses of AI that people are discovering that enrich their lives a little bit. If they're seeing something like this and they're suddenly worried about how they're interacting with their artificial intelligence and how it could impact the greater world and the artists that they maybe love and the friends that they're sending it to, do you have any advice for people in that situation as they sort of try to approach this new world? I know that's kind of a weird question, but it is the most personally anecdotable sort of use of AI that I experience on a day-to-day basis.
Right, right. It's a good question, and that does make it tangible. I think a conversation that I have with students at Virginia Tech around digital literacy is that, as much as we would like to see these things as it's just a tool, it's just a neutral thing, there are these broader implications for misinformation. What if that image gets shared outside of your group chat? What happens then if it goes beyond the control that you thought you might have had? when we put things out there, they often spin out like that. What are the implications of the energy expenditures of the AI tool that you're using? That's an ethical implication that I talk about with students a lot. So it's tough because we want to find these pockets of joy and happiness and connection with other people. We want to use digital tools to do that. I hope that digital literacy can empower people to do that. But that also isn't a neutral act in itself, and it can have these other real world implications. So I think just being mindful about all of that, and as much as we can, making decisions that take those pieces into account, and having that awareness of how things can push beyond maybe your initial intention for them.
Absolutely. And, Julia, first of all, we really appreciate your time. We've already taken too much of it here. Is there anything else you want to add before we let you go? And I think maybe I would love to talk to you one day about how how your students are approaching this, what kind of questions they have for you. We're short on time today, but that is something I'd love to be able to talk to you about at some point. Until then, is there anything else you want to add about this new news featuring Taylor Swift, these trademarks, and the entertainment industry with AI?
Yeah, I'd love to come back to what you were pointing out earlier, that the practices that we use to verify information also apply to not getting scammed, also apply to, you're doing some research to make a decision. Many of these practices apply to all areas of our lives. So taking the time to practice and get used to thinking in this way, it's it's not going to have just one small effect. It's going to be something you use in lots of different places. So I think you were right on to point out that there are connections here to lots of different areas that we can apply them to.
Absolutely. And hopefully that's something that can become as commonplace as any other safety practice, is people sort of even being able to drill down on these things, really learn how to spot all of these various tells that something is not real as we get into a world that is increasingly easier to make things seem fake. So, Julia, I really appreciate you coming on. This has been great. Thanks for taking the time, and hopefully you have a great rest of your week.
Oh, you too. Thanks for having me.